The Galactic Council chamber was loud as always. Hundreds of alien species filled the massive room, their voices mixing into a wall of noise. Some argued about trade routes. Others complained about borders. A few shouted about resources they claimed belonged to them. In the middle of all this chaos, Ambassador Hyan-Wu sat quietly in the human section, his hands folded on the desk in front of him. He had been doing this job for 8 years now. 8 long years of watching the same patterns repeat over and over. A crisis would happen somewhere in the galaxy. The council would panic. They would look at the humans, and humans would fix it. Then everyone would forget about it until the next problem came along. Hyan-Wu remembered the Velkari's food crisis 3 years ago. Their crops were dying, and billions faced starvation. The council held meetings for weeks, talking and talking, but doing nothing. Then they called in G1, a human agricultural engineer. She was young, barely 30, but brilliant. She spent 6 months on the Velkari homeworld, working 20-hour days in their fields. She figured out what was killing their crops and how to fix it. She saved billions of lives. The Velkari thanked her once and never spoke to her again. Then there was the Therian Civil War. 2 sides fought for years, destroying their own planet. The council tried to stop it, but failed every time. They sent in Daehain, a human mediator. He was patient and calm, even when both sides screamed at him. He spent a year going back and forth, listening to their anger, finding common ground where everyone else saw only hate. He wrote a peace treaty so detailed and fair that both sides finally agreed. The war ended. Daehain went home. Nobody from the council even sent him a message of thanks. Just 6 months ago, the entire council communication network crashed. Thousands of systems went dark. Trade stopped. Governments couldn't talk to each other. The council's own technicians tried to fix it for 3 days and made it worse. Then they called Subin. She was a human network specialist who had fixed smaller problems before. She worked for 72 hours straight without sleep, crawling through access tunnels and rewriting code that alien engineers couldn't understand. She got everything working again. The council speaker mentioned her name once in an official statement. That was all. This was how it always went. Humans solved problems. Humans built things. Humans kept the galaxy running. And the council treated them like useful machines. Not equals. Not partners. Just tools to be used when needed and ignored when not. Today was worse than usual. Hyan-Wu had prepared a proposal for fair trade regulations. Human merchants were being cheated across the galaxy. They paid full taxes, but received none of the protections that other species got. Their ships were searched more often. Their cargo was delayed. Their complaints were dismissed. Hyan-Wu had spent months documenting everything, building a case that was impossible to deny. He waited for his turn to speak. The Karathi delegate talked for 30 minutes about something completely unrelated. Then the Velkari representative stood up and talked for 20 more minutes. Finally, the council speaker, a tall being named Velthan, looked toward the human section. Hyan-Wu stood up. He began to speak. Within seconds, the Karathi delegate interrupted him. Then the Velkari joined in. Soon half the chamber was talking over him, not even pretending to listen. Hyan-Wu tried to continue. His voice was drowned out completely. Council Speaker Velthan banged his gavel. The room went quiet. Hyan-Wu prepared to speak again. But Velthan looked past him, calling on the next delegate instead. Someone actually laughed. A high-pitched sound from the back of the chamber. Hyan-Wu heard Velthan say something to another council member. The words were quiet, but the microphone caught them. Useful servants, not equals. We should remember that. More laughter followed. For a long moment, Hyan-Wu just stood there. He looked around the chamber at all these species that humans had helped. Species that were alive because of human doctors. Species that were fed because of human engineers. Species that were at peace because of human diplomats. And every single one of them looked at him like he was nothing. Hyan-Wu closed his folder. He picked up his datapad. He walked toward the exit. His aide, a younger human named Taemin, looked confused but followed him. The council chamber continued with its business. Nobody even noticed they had left. Outside the chamber, Taemin asked what they were doing. Hian-Woo pulled out his communicator and sent a message to Earth. It was short and simple. We're done here. Begin withdrawal protocol. Within hours, the message spread through every human community in Council Space. Scientists began packing up their research. Engineers started shutting down the systems they had built. Doctors closed their clinics. Teachers left their schools. Merchants loaded their cargo and pointed their ships toward home. Diplomats at hundreds of embassies began filing departure documents. It was all very quiet, very organized. No anger, no threats, no dramatic speeches. Humans simply stopped. They finished whatever task was in front of them, packed their things, and left. When asked why, they all gave the same answer. Our contract is complete. We're going home. The council noticed something was happening but didn't understand what it meant. A few delegates asked questions. Hian-Woo sent one final message to the council headquarters. It was even shorter than the first. Humanity is withdrawing from council space. We wish you well. Then the communication channels went dark. Every human frequency, every embassy line, every trade network connection, all of it shut down at the same moment. Earth and all human colonies stopped answering calls. They weren't hostile. They weren't angry. They simply weren't there anymore. The last human ship left council space exactly 48 hours after. Hian-Woo walked out of that chamber. Station Nexus Prime watched it jump to faster than light speed and disappear. The human section of the station was empty. Clean, organized, and completely empty. In the council chamber, delegates were still arguing about trade routes and borders. They didn't know yet what silence would teach them. They didn't know yet what they had lost, but they would learn soon enough. The first week after the humans left was actually pleasant for most of the council. The Karathi delegate gave a speech about how they were better off without human interference. Several others agreed. Council Speaker Velthan seemed proud of himself, as if he had somehow won a victory. The chamber felt lighter without the humans sitting there, quietly judging them with their strange moral standards. By the second week, small problems started appearing. The Valkyrie agricultural stations began showing error messages. These were the same stations that GI-1 had redesigned 3 years ago. The Valkyrie technicians tried to fix the errors using their old manuals. Nothing worked. The errors got worse. They called other species for help. Nobody understood the human modifications well enough to fix them properly. In the third week, the problems were no longer small. The Therian peace treaty started falling apart. Both sides of their old civil war had questions about specific terms in the agreement. These were complex issues that Daehyun had carefully balanced. He had written detailed notes explaining every choice, but those notes were in human databases that were no longer accessible. Without someone who understood the treaty's full depth, both sides started arguing again. Small disagreements became bigger ones. The council tried to ignore these issues. They were just bad luck, Velthan said. Temporary problems that would sort themselves out. But the problems kept growing. The fourth week brought a real crisis. A plague broke out on 3 Drenix colony worlds. It was a new mutation of an old disease, the kind of thing that happened every few years. For the past decade, these outbreaks had been handled quickly and efficiently by Dr. Hannah, human medical researcher who specialized in rapid mutation diseases. She would arrive, analyze the plague, develop a treatment, and have it distributed within days. The Drenix government sent urgent messages to Dr. Hannah. No response. They contacted the human medical networks. Silence. Finally, they called in their own best scientists. These were smart people who had worked alongside Hannah for years. They had watched her work. They thought they knew what to do. They were wrong. Hannah's methods looked simple when she did them, but they were based on years of research that she had never fully explained. She just fixed problems when they appeared. The Drenix scientists tried to copy her approach. They ran tests. They developed treatments. Nothing worked as well as Hannah's solutions. The plague spread. Thousands got sick. Then tens of thousands. By week 6, people were dying. The Drenix government begged the council for help. The council sent their best medical teams. None of them could match what one human doctor had done routinely. The death count climbed past 50,000, then 100,000. The Drenix colonies began to panic. Meanwhile, the economic problems were getting impossible to ignore. For decades, human trading companies had connected hundreds of star systems. They ran shipping routes that other species found unprofitable. They maintained warehouses in remote locations. They provided services that seemed simple but required enormous coordination behind the scenes. All of that stopped when the humans left. Independent traders tried to fill the gap, but it wasn't the same. Shipping costs tripled. Delivery times doubled. Small colonies that depended on regular supply runs started running out of basic goods. Medicine, spare parts, food that they couldn't grow locally. Station Administrator Caius watched his once busy trade hub become quieter each day. Ships that used to stop there regularly now took different routes. Merchants who used to fill his markets were gone. The human traders had made everything so efficient that nobody realized how much work they were doing. Now that work wasn't being done. The whole system was breaking down. Caius tried to convince other traders to take over the human routes. They looked at the numbers and shook their heads. Not profitable enough. Too much risk. The humans had done it because they believed in connecting people, in keeping trade fair and open. Other species just wanted profit. Without humans to hold it together, the trading network collapsed. Council Speaker Velthan called an emergency economic meeting. His advisors presented their reports. The numbers were bad. Tax revenue was down 30%. Trade volume had dropped by half. Unemployment was rising across multiple systems. One of his advisors, an analyst named Theron, had compiled a classified report on human economic contributions. Velthan read it in private and felt something close to fear. Humans hadn't just been part of the economy. They had been the foundation of it. Their trading networks, their banking systems, their insurance companies, their shipping logistics. All of it designed to help other species trade more easily. And all of it was gone. Velthan tried to stay confident in public. He told the council that they would adapt. They would find new solutions. But privately, he started to worry. He sent a message to the human embassy on Earth. It bounced back, undelivered. He tried other channels. All dead. Earth wasn't answering anyone. By week 8, the Council's defensive grid started having problems. Random glitches at first, then bigger failures. The grid was a massive system protecting thousands of worlds from pirates and raiders. It had been built by a dozen species over centuries, each adding their own technology. The result was complicated and barely held together. For the past 20 years, a human engineer named Taeyong had maintained the whole thing. He understood how all the different technologies worked together. He could fix problems that left other engineers confused. He would look at a failing system, think for a moment, and just know what was wrong. It seemed like magic to the others. Without Taeyong, the grid's problems went unfixed. Other engineers tried their best, but what Taeyong fixed in ours took them weeks. Some problems they couldn't fix at all. Gaps appeared in the defensive coverage. Pirates noticed, raids increased. Ships traveling through poorly protected areas started disappearing. The Council hired expensive specialists from multiple species. They worked around the clock. They managed to keep the grid from completely failing, but barely. And every day, it got a little worse. In the Council chamber, the mood had changed completely. Nobody was celebrating anymore. Delegates who had laughed at the humans leaving were now demanding solutions. Arguments broke out about who was responsible. The Karathi blamed the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie blamed the Therians. Everyone blamed Velthan, but the real problem wasn't any one person. It was the entire system. For generations, the Council had treated humans as useful servants. Take their help. Use their skills. Give them nothing in return. It had worked for so long that everyone thought it would work forever. Now they were learning the cost of that arrogance. And the bill was getting higher every day. 3 months had passed since the humans left. What started as small problems had become a full crisis. The council chamber meetings grew more desperate each week. Delegates who used to spend hours arguing about minor issues now faced real disasters and had no solutions. The defensive grid situation got much worse. The gaps that pirates exploited in the beginning were now major holes in the protection system. Entire trade routes were no longer safe. Merchant ships traveled in armed convoys or didn't travel at all. Some remote colonies requested evacuation because they couldn't defend themselves anymore. The council brought in their absolute best technicians from 5 different species. They studied the grid for weeks. They found something disturbing. The grid wasn't just maintained by humans. It had been redesigned by them. Piece by piece, over 20 years, engineer Taeyang had rebuilt huge sections of the system. He hadn't just fixed the old alien technology. He had understood why it was flawed in the first place and made it better. The original designers were long dead. Their documentation was incomplete. Taeyang had worked from memory and intuition, seeing connections that others missed. Now, looking at his work, the council technicians realized they were staring at genius they couldn't recreate. They could keep the grid running at maybe 60% effectiveness. That was the best they could do. Pirates weren't the only problem. 3 major colonies were now in danger from something much worse than raiders. Their terraforming systems were failing. These were old colony worlds that had been made livable through massive environmental engineering. The systems that maintained their atmospheres were breaking down. A human scientist named Jung So had been responsible for all 3 colonies. The council checked his records and discovered something shocking. Jung So hadn't been maintaining the original terraforming systems. 15 years ago, he had realized those systems were poorly designed and would eventually fail. So he had quietly replaced them with his own designs. He never made a big announcement about it. He just did the work because it needed to be done. His designs were brilliant. They were also completely undocumented. Jung So had kept most of the technical details in his head. Now he was gone, and the systems he built were starting to show problems. The council sent teams to fix them. The teams couldn't even figure out how the systems worked. 2 of the colonies started experiencing atmospheric degradation. The air was slowly becoming unbreathable. They had maybe a year before evacuation became necessary. The medical crisis continued to spread. The Drenix plague had killed over 300,000 people. It finally burned itself out, but only after devastating 3 entire colony worlds. Other medical emergencies followed. Diseases that used to be handled quickly now became major incidents. The galaxy had dozens of human doctors who specialized in different areas. They were all gone. The replacements weren't as good. Economic collapse continued across multiple systems. The trade networks that humans built had connected poor systems with rich ones, making sure everyone could buy and sell goods fairly. Without those networks, the poor systems got poorer. The rich systems hoarded resources. Inequality grew. Some systems started experiencing food shortages. Others couldn't get basic medicine. Station Administrator Caius watched his trade hub die slowly. Half the shops were closed now. The other half barely survived. Traffic through the station dropped by 70%. He laid off most of his staff. The ones who remained were angry and scared. Some talked about leaving. Caius didn't blame them. There was nothing left here. He remembered the human traders who used to fill his markets. They weren't the richest merchants or the most aggressive dealers. But they were reliable. They were fair. They treated people with respect. And somehow, their presence had made the whole station work better. Now they were gone, and everything was falling apart. The council tried desperately to contact Earth. They sent diplomatic ships to the edge of human space. The ships were turned away by automated defense systems. No humans even bothered to communicate with them. The council sent messages offering new trade deals, better contracts, formal apologies. All their messages went into the void with no response. In frustration, Korathi Commander Zelvik suggested a military solution. Send a fleet into human space and force them to come back. The suggestion was discussed seriously for about an hour. Then the Council's military intelligence presented their analysis of human defensive capabilities. It turned out humans had been building serious military infrastructure for decades. Nothing aggressive. Just solid defenses around their territory. The council had ignored it because humans never acted hostile. Now the intelligence analysts looked closer and realized human military technology was at least equal to the council's, possibly better. An invasion would be costly, probably unsuccessful, would guarantee humans would never help them again. The military option was abandoned immediately. Nobody wanted a war they might lose. Political tensions inside the council reached a breaking point. Different species started blaming each other. The Karathi said the Velkari had been too dependent on human help. The Velkari said the Therians had treated humans like slaves. The Therians said the Karathi had insulted human intelligence. Everyone blamed Council Speaker Velthan for his arrogant comment that started the whole thing. Velthan tried to maintain control, but his authority was crumbling. Several major species threatened to leave the council entirely and handle their own problems. The unity that had held the galaxy together for centuries was breaking down. And without humans to mediate disputes, nobody could stop the arguing. Some delegations began quietly investigating what was happening outside council space. They found interesting reports. The independent colonies and minor systems that weren't part of the council were doing fine. Many of them still had human help. These were systems that had always treated humans fairly, as partners rather than servants. Humans hadn't abandoned them. This news spread through the council quickly. It became clear that humans hadn't left the galaxy. They had left the council specifically. They were still out there, helping people who deserved help. They had just decided the council didn't deserve it anymore. This realization hurt more than any of the practical problems. It meant humans hadn't acted out of anger or spite. They had made a calm, rational decision that the council wasn't worth their time. That level of dismissal was devastating. By month 4, half the council delegates had returned to their home systems to deal with local crises. The grand chamber that once held hundreds now had maybe 40 delegates on a good day. The rest were too busy managing disasters to attend meetings. Council Speaker Velthan looked around the mostly empty chamber and finally understood what had happened. The galaxy hadn't collapsed. People were still alive. Civilization continued. But everything was harder now. Everything was worse. The council had fallen from being a great galactic power to barely holding together. And it was all because they had treated their most valuable partners like worthless servants. One delegate, a thoughtful being named Morena, stood up during a session. She had always treated humans with respect. She asked a simple question that nobody wanted to answer. Can we admit we were wrong? Can we actually change? And if we can, would it even matter? Why would humans ever trust us again? The chamber fell silent. Nobody had an answer. The silence stretched on and on, just like the silence from Earth. And in that silence, the council finally began to understand what they had lost. 6 months had passed since Ambassador Hyenwu walked out of the council chamber. Station Nexus Prime, once the proud center of galactic civilization, looked like a ghost of its former self. Half the residential sections were empty. Most of the markets had closed. The grand diplomatic halls were quiet. Only the most essential personnel remained. And even they talked about leaving. The council chamber meetings happened twice a week now, instead of every day. There just weren't enough delegates to make daily sessions worthwhile. The ones who still attended were tired and desperate. These weren't the proud representatives who had once dismissed human concerns. These were survivors trying to hold together, something that was clearly falling apart. Counselor Morena had taken on a special project. After her question about admitting fault had gone unanswered, she decided to find the real answer herself. She spent 3 months investigating exactly what humans had contributed to the council. What she found was more extensive than anyone had imagined. She compiled everything into a massive report. It wasn't just about the big obvious things like Dr. Hannah saving billions from plagues or Engineer Tae-Yang maintaining the defensive grid. It was about thousands of small contributions that nobody had noticed. Human teachers in council schools, raising the education quality across dozens of species. Human artists who had created works that brought different cultures together. Human janitors who kept stations clean and safe. Human cooks who figured out how to make food that dozens of species could eat together. Humans had been everywhere, doing everything, making the galaxy work better in ways both large and small. They had been the glue holding a fractious collection of species together. They had translated not just languages, but ideas, helping species that hated each other find common ground. They had worked jobs that others considered beneath them. They had solved problems that others didn't even notice existed, and the Council had treated all of this as if it was owed to them. As if humans were supposed to serve, as if their contributions were worth nothing more than occasional acknowledgement. Morena presented her report to the remaining council members. The room was silent as she went through page after page of evidence. By the end, several delegates were openly upset. A few looked ashamed. Council Speaker Velthon sat with his head in his hands. "We didn't just lose workers," Morena said quietly. "We lost partners, friends, people who genuinely wanted to help us build something better. And we treated them like servants, like tools, like they were lucky we even let them participate." One of the Korathi delegates tried to argue. "They were paid fairly. They chose to work for us." Morena fixed him with a cold stare. "Did they? Or did we create a system where they had to work twice as hard for half the respect just to be considered equal? Where their innovations were used but never credited? Where their problems were dismissed but their labor was demanded?" The Korathi delegate sat down without another word. Reports from across the galaxy continued to paint a grim picture. 2 colony worlds had been evacuated due to terraforming failures. The death toll from medical crises had passed 500,000. Pirate raids had increased by 300%. Trade volume was down 60% from pre-departure levels. Unemployment, poverty, and instability were rising everywhere, but the news from outside council space told a different story. The independent systems were thriving. The remnant worlds, a collection of poor systems that the council had always ignored, were experiencing an economic boom. Human engineers were building infrastructure there. Human teachers were opening schools. Human doctors were establishing clinics. All the help that used to go to the council was now going to people who appreciated it. Some council species tried to make deals with these independent systems, offering money for human assistance. The attempts failed. The independent systems didn't want council involvement. They had seen what the council did to humans and wanted no part of it. Several systems sent messages to the council saying exactly that. "You had the best partners in the galaxy, and you threw them away. That's your problem, not ours." These rejections hurt almost as much as the practical problems. The galaxy was moving on without the council. New trade networks were forming between human space and the independent systems. New alliances were being built. The council was becoming irrelevant, a relic of the past that nobody needed anymore. Council Speaker Velthon called an emergency session. Only 23 delegates attended. He looked around the mostly empty chamber and made an announcement that many had thought impossible. "We need to dissolve the council as it currently exists and rebuild it based on actual equality," he said. "No more hierarchy. No more servant species. No more taking anyone for granted. If we don't change fundamentally, we don't deserve to continue." The proposal caused an uproar. The old guard delegates who remained protested strongly. Change the council? Abandon traditions that had lasted for centuries? Admit that their entire system was wrong? Impossible. Humiliating. Unacceptable. But the alternative was watching everything collapse completely. Several major species had already withdrawn most of their participation. Others were considering leaving entirely. The council was dying. They could either change or accept death. The debate lasted for weeks. It was bitter and painful. Every species had to confront uncomfortable truths about how they had treated others. Every delegate had to admit their own failures. Many couldn't do it and left. But slowly, a core group emerged who understood that real change was necessary. They drafted a new council charter. It was radically different from the old one. Every species was equal, no matter how powerful or numerous. Decisions required genuine consensus, not just majority votes. Labor was respected and valued. Contributors were honored, not exploited. It was everything the old council hadn't been. When the new charter was finalized, Morena read it aloud in the nearly empty chamber. This is what we should have been all along, she said. Now the question is whether we can actually live up to these words. Counselor Velthan, who had lost most of his power and authority, asked the obvious question. Even if we change, why would humans care? Why would they believe us? Morena didn't have a good answer to that. None of them did. They had spent decades proving themselves untrustworthy. Words on paper wouldn't change that. Only time and actions could rebuild trust. And they had no guarantee that humans would give them that chance. We have to try, Morena finally said. We have to go to them not as the council that dismissed them, but as people who want to start over. We have to be willing to work for their trust the way they worked for us, for as long as it takes. The remaining delegates voted on the new charter. It passed unanimously. The old Galactic Council officially dissolved itself. The new Council of Equals was formed, smaller and humbler than its predecessor. Now came the hard part. Asking for forgiveness from people they had wronged. Hoping for a chance they probably didn't deserve. Facing the silence from Earth and wondering if it would ever end, Morena volunteered to lead a delegation to human space. It was dangerous. The humans might refuse to see them. They might send them away unheard. But someone had to try. She selected a small group of delegates, ones who had always treated humans fairly. No military escort. No grand ships. Just a simple vessel with a simple message. We were wrong. We want to change. Will you give us a chance? They departed for the edge of human space, not knowing if anyone would answer. Morena's ship waited at the edge of human space for 3 weeks. The small delegation sent messages every day explaining who they were and why they had come. They transmitted the new council charter. They provided evidence of the changes that had been made. They asked simply and honestly for a chance to talk. There was no response. The automated defense systems acknowledged their presence, but nothing more. No threats. No warnings. Just silence. The same silence that Earth had given the entire galaxy for 6 months. Some of the delegates wanted to give up. They're not interested, one said. We should go home. But Morena insisted they wait. We took their help for granted for decades. We can wait a few more weeks. On the 24th day, something changed. A single human ship appeared on their sensors. It was a mid-sized vessel, not military but well-armed enough to handle itself. The ship approached slowly and sent a communication request. Morena answered immediately. A young human woman appeared on the screen. She looked to be in her early 30s, with short dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I'm Captain Minji of the Earth vessel Second Chance, she said. You've been asking to talk? I'm here to listen. Morena introduced herself and her small delegation. She explained about the old council dissolving and the new one forming. She talked about the investigations into human contributions and the shame. They felt at how those contributions had been treated. She was honest about everything, including the disasters that had happened since humans left. Captain Minji listened without interrupting. Her expression gave away nothing. When Morena finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Minji spoke. I grew up hearing stories about the council, she said. My mother was an engineer who worked on the defensive grid. My uncle was a teacher on Station Nexus Prime. They told me about the work they did and how they were treated. They told me about coming home angry and tired, feeling like they were giving everything and getting nothing back. Morena nodded slowly. We can't undo the past. We can only acknowledge it was wrong and try to do better. Do better, Minji repeated. That's easy to say. The real question is why. Why should we believe you? What's different now besides the fact that you need us? It was a fair question. The harsh question they all knew was coming. Morena had prepared an answer, but looking at this young captain who had grown up hearing about council disrespect, she realized her prepared words wouldn't be enough. You're right to be skeptical, Morena said. The truth is, we don't have proof that we've changed. Words are easy. We wrote a new charter, but that's just paper. What we're offering is time and the chance to see if we mean it. Time, Minji said. How much time? As long as it takes. Years, decades if necessary. We know we have to earn back trust. We're prepared to work for it the same way your people worked for us. Minji looked at the faces of the other delegates on the screen. And what about them? Do they all agree with this? One by one, the other delegates spoke up. They admitted their own failures. They acknowledged how their species had treated humans. They promised to do better. Some were more convincing than others, but all of them seemed genuine. Let me see this new charter, Minji said. Morena transmitted it immediately. The captain read through it carefully. The silence stretched on for several minutes. Finally, she looked up. This is good. On paper, it's everything the old council should have been. But I'm not the one who decides if we give you a chance. That's a decision for Earth. You understand, Morena said. We're asking you to take our message back. Take the charter. Take everything we've said. Let your people decide. And if they say no? Morena took a breath. Then we accept that. We've lost the right to demand anything from you. All we can do is ask and respect whatever answer we receive. Captain Minji studied them for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I'll take your message to Earth. I can't promise anything beyond that. That's all we're asking, Morena said. The human ship departed. Morena's delegation waited at the border for another month. They didn't know what was happening on Earth. They didn't know if anyone was even considering their request. They just waited, hoping for a chance they knew they might not deserve. Back on Earth, the debates were intense. The human government reviewed everything Morena had sent. They investigated whether the council changes were real or just political theater. They sent quiet observers to council space to see the situation firsthand. Most importantly, they asked the people who had worked for the council what they thought. Ambassador Hyenwu was consulted.
Dr. Hannah, Engineer Taeyang.
All the humans who had given so much and received so little, their opinions were mixed. Some wanted nothing to do with the council ever again. Others were willing to give them one chance, but only one. Nobody trusted the council easily. The debates on Earth lasted for weeks. Finally, a decision was made. Not to flood back into council space, not to forgive and forget, but to send one person as a test. Someone who could assess if the changes were real. Someone whose judgment they trusted. 3 months after Morena's delegation arrived at the border, they received a message. A single human ship was coming to Station Nexus Prime. One representative. One chance to prove the council had actually changed. Morena returned to the station immediately. She worked to prepare for the human arrival. The station was still in poor condition from months of decline, but she made sure everything possible was ready. The new council members gathered nervously. This was the moment that would determine their future. The human ship docked a week later. The airlock opened. Out stepped a woman in her 40s wearing a simple work uniform. She carried a toolkit and looked. Around the station, with professional assessment, Morena recognized her from the reports. Bora, one of the engineers, who had maintained the station's systems before the departure. She had worked here for 10 years, doing thankless maintenance work that kept thousands of beings safe and comfortable. Biora walked up to Morena and the waiting delegates. She didn't smile. She didn't offer warm greetings. She just looked at them with the eyes of someone who had been disappointed before and wasn't going to be fooled easily. I'm here to see if you've actually changed, Biora said simply. I'm not interested in speeches or promises. Show me what you've done. Show me what's different. Morena nodded. Where do you want to start? Biora looked around at the deteriorating station. Show me what needs fixing. Show me what you've tried to fix and couldn't. Show me how you treat the workers who are still here. Show me everything. For the next month, Biora inspected the station from top to bottom. She talked to maintenance workers, merchants, residents, council staff. She read through the new charter and watched how it was being implemented. She tested whether the promised changes were real or just words on paper. Morena and the other council members gave her complete access to everything. They answered every question honestly, even when the answers made them look bad. They didn't try to hide their failures or exaggerate their improvements. Bora worked on some of the station's broken systems, teaching the alien engineers how to fix things properly. She watched how they responded to her instructions, whether they listened or dismissed her, whether they treated her as a teacher or a servant. Finally, after 6 weeks on the station, Biora sent her report back to Earth. It was detailed, honest, and cautiously optimistic. "They've changed some things," she wrote. "Not everything, not perfectly, but they're trying. They're actually listening. It's not like it was before." She ended her report with a recommendation. "Send more people, slowly, carefully. Watch to make sure the changes stick. But I think we can work with this new council, as long as they remember this time that we're partners, not servants." Earth received the report and made its decision. Small numbers of humans began returning to council space, not flooding back like before, but arriving in careful groups. They worked on critical problems. They taught others their skills instead of just doing all the work themselves. They watched constantly to see if the old patterns would return. The new council members understood they were being tested. Every day, every interaction, one instance of taking humans for granted could end everything. So they worked to treat humans as true equals, to value their contributions, to say thank you and mean it. It wasn't perfect. Old habits died hard. Some species adapted better than others. There were mistakes and setbacks, but the overall trajectory was different, better. Real Bora stayed on Station Nexus Prime, working alongside alien engineers and slowly bringing the station back to life. She was tough and demanding, pushing people to meet higher standards. But she was also fair, and when someone learned something well, she acknowledged it. One day, 6 months after her arrival, she was working on a complex repair when one of the alien engineers she had been training stopped her. "Thank you," he said simply, "for teaching us. For coming back. We don't deserve it." Biora looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe you didn't deserve it before, but you're working to deserve it now. That's what matters." She went back to her repair work, but she was smiling slightly. It was a small moment. Just a brief exchange between an engineer and her student, but it represented something larger. A galaxy learning to value people instead of using them. A civilization growing up and understanding that cooperation meant treating others with respect.